The Hulk is in a weird place. With each year, it feels like the MCU version of the Hulk grows further and further from the comic iteration, or the version anyone wants to actually see for that matter. A lot of people read the comics, from the epic Planet Hulk and World War Hulk to Al Ewing's fantastic Immortal Hulk, stories that turn the Green Goliath into some existential threat not only to himself but to those around him. He is a threat, a ticking time bomb, the embodiment of unrelenting power in the worst way possible, and the MCU has turned him into, your kindly uncle who's a little dorky and wears sweater vests on the weekends. People look at the MCU and go, where's the fear the Hulk brings? The Hulk hasn't felt like the Hulk in live action since 2017 in Thor Ragnarok, an adaptation loosely of the Planet Hulk storyline. That was almost 10 years ago. And since then, we've been stuck with either Professor Hulk or Hulk as some dwarf. The guy gets beaten up to show how big bad your bad guy is, like Thanos. I think Hulk kind of works in Endgame for what they're doing, a culmination of his struggle, but the problem is we've kept going past that. In the comics, when Professor Hulk showed up, there would always be the other personalities, but we've only seen one unified personality. No longer a threat, just a calm, controlled hero. There's something so weak about that. He's increasingly given goofy scenes, making him this kind of silly, kind of funny guy. His villains have been handed off to other characters, such as his cousin, She-Hulk, or Sam Wilson. Brand New Day, though. Spider-Man Brand New Day. It looks like in Brand New Day, however, we're finally getting the Hulk as a lurking threat. Someone veiled in shadows. Someone who can crush your skull between his fingers. Someone who would threaten you. Someone you don't want to get cornered by. True terror. True aura. But in this era, I've noticed a bunch of people going back to the past. Not the Incredible Hulk, and not the 70s Hulk series, though that's also really good, but the 2003 attempt to bring the Hulk to the big screen, Ang Lee's Hulk. And many have said the movie's better than you might think. I disagree, but I don't think it's without merit. Obviously, no adaptation of Hulk has really captured the full spirit of the character from the comics. No. And I don't care how many people on TikTok or YouTube glaze Ang Lee's film. I can't get behind this languid, boring film as some unseen masterpiece. But it's not without merit, and I think by ignoring those merits, we kind of ignore why Hulk has fallen off. Because modern MCU has obviously tried going away from what Ang Lee did, even though the comics have gone way further with what Ang Lee was trying to do. So it's in this weird middle ground. The comics have gone way in the other direction, and the films have gone in the complete opposite direction as well. And it's easy to see the merits, especially from a distance, is the integration of the revolutionary Hulk CG model with the on-set special effects great. Yeah. Is Danny Elfman's score one of the most haunting and underrated superhero scores of all time? Yes. Is Sam Elliott the best actor to play Thunderbolt Ross? Absolutely. But does the film work? No. It's a broken film. Ang Lee's film is extremely broken. The most obvious thing is its visual language. Despite having these great effects, it incorporates these bizarre comic visuals that breaks the film into panels. This sometimes works. For example, when they're transporting the Hulk on a military helicopter, there's all these cuts that are shot into the screen and shoved in place. That does echo what a comic book would look like. But then there's other visuals, like that weird one, where the one asshole guy is knocked over by the explosion and consumed by flames, and there's that white border around it. Like, what's up with that? What are we doing here? This is goofy as hell. Is it campy? Yeah, but it's distracting in its campiness. The style draws attention to itself in a way that feels style over substance. It doesn't really add anything to the scenes unless it's something more subdued. There's a reason why certain cartoonish effects are garish in retrospect with many films. And what makes the campiness so more difficult is that there's some genuinely disturbing scenes in this movie. Bruce Banner as a kid, compartmentalizing the domestic abuse of his family, repressing memories, that's disturbing. The MCU has, by and large, avoided discussing Bruce's childhood, outside of jokes and She-Hulk, essentially. As the films go on, we become aware something disturbing must have happened to Bruce at some point, especially considering how many other Hulks we now have in the MCU, and how all of them are in complete control of their personalities. She-Hulk, Abomination, they own their rage, they own their transformations, but Bruce can't. And why is that? Well, because Bruce spent decades suppressing his inner pain. The Ang Lee film shows that. The MCU suggests that. Ang Lee's film, though, is vague in other respects. Like the MCU film, the conflict is ultimately divided between two core issues: Hulk needs to avoid the military and overcome the pain of his childhood by punching Nick Nolte dad in the face hard. Problem is, he has superpowers now and it's hard to do that. Simple. Much like in the Incredible Hulk film from the MCU, which had the military chase after the Hulk, and then you had to fight Abomination, Emil Blonsky, and punch him really hard in the face as well. Although that time it felt more satisfying to, well, I'll get to that. What Ang Lee's films ultimately about are how fathers shape the lives of their children. But despite the various dream sequences and various scenes of abuse and shouting and difficulties, we don't feel it. The big issue with Ang Lee's film is we don't feel much. And ultimately the disturbing sequences, the garish transitions, and all the comic booky stuff on screen feels like a distraction to hide the fact the film is not doing a good job at making you feel like you are in the film with the characters. What do I mean? Let's break it down. The problems with the film start in Act 1, where we see Bruce's childhood, and then transition to him going off to college, and then working in a lab. These scenes lack any distinction of how much time has passed at first, and therefore it's hard to really follow these sequences in logical order. We get a sense of what they are, but the way it's shot, you would think Bruce is going off to college and then goes to a college lab with Betty. It's very odd watching that whole thing. It's odd transitioning from seeing this domestic scene with Bruce's parents, and then seeing him have a mom. We realize, of course, very quickly it's an adopted mother, but it is disorienting on a first watch. If you don't know it's not his real mother, you might have thought, oh, well, I guess nothing really bad happened in the past, which is not the case, actually. The opening act continues by introducing Betty and Bruce, but we meet them after they've already broken up. Maybe, or tried a relationship didn't work out. The scene is so stiff and all the characters act so suppressed. We learn that Betty and Bruce were together through expository dialogue, with characters saying what they feel, and the conflicts of the movie are discussed in terms of, oh, we gotta get the lab set up, we gotta do the presentation, get that set up. We don't see the presentation. Because that's the problem, isn't it? We don't see what's going on. It's very interesting, too. You see, what's so frustrating is there was a Marvel film at this time that had come out just recently, where there is a scientist who is developing something remarkable, who is on the clock, where the investors and the military, they're hammering down to get this thing done, to get this project ready. Spider-Man. The comparisons between the Hulk and Spider-Man are hard not to draw. Both have a Danny Elfman score. Both involve science experiments gone wrong. Both are Marvel properties. Both have Stan Lee early on. But the difference here is that with Norman Osborn's experiments, where he becomes the Green Goblin, we are shown step by step all the things going wrong leading up to the experiment itself going wrong. And we have this alternate persona that the Goblin embodies that makes him do evil, terrible things. Keep in mind, Spider-Man came out a couple years before the Hulk. Audiences have Spider-Man in mind when watching these sequences at a lab, with Bruce experimenting on animals and all that. So to not see the investors, the board of directors, the people that are trying to sell this product to, whatever this product might be, it reduces the tension we can feel in the scene, because we don't have a material anchor to what they're talking about. Without a material anchor, without a sense of external conflict, it's hard to judge what's going on. Best we get is Talbot, which we'll get to in a second. Anyway, after this boring hallway scene, we see Betty having a flashback. And it's an interesting dream sequence, honestly, where Betty remembers seeing a base blowing up in her childhood. And we learn that in the prologue, that explosion was caused by Bruce's father, detonating an actual base he was on in the desert. The dream sequence is surreal, but I don't think it communicates any feelings. I watch this and go, oh, Betty was there the day that Bruce's dad went nuts. I don't feel anything. There are many scenes like that in the film that are surreal, but don't tell us much, though there are some good visuals that people can cite and go, that's really deep. Like the sequence of the Hulk lurking inside the room where, well, we'll get to that. Then we get to Talbot. He's this asshole guy who works for a company, and he's interested in buying out Betty and Bruce's research. While Glenn Talbot is a character from the comics, he worked with Thunderbolt Ross, he had a crush on Betty, and he was motivated by those crushed feelings to pursue the Hulk. I keep thinking this should be Doc Samson or Blonsky, someone who's more interesting to comic book fans than to the Hulk, because his whole motivation is he wants to get the research that they're doing and use it for military purposes. Because Betty and Bruce are making a chemical that can cause regeneration, he goes, well, if we have this as a military applied science, we can have soldiers regenerate on the battlefield. Again, very much like every other corrupt executive in sci-fi films. Jurassic World, what are they trying to do? Get the raptor to use for some genetic experiment. In The Spider-Man film. What are they trying to do? Get the Goblin formula to use on soldiers, or the exoskeleton. Or in Iron Man 2, it's getting the Iron Man suit for soldiers. It's the same concept. Even in The Incredible Hulk, it's get the super soldier serum for military applied sciences. It's the same concept every time, and so Glenn Talbot feels very unremarkable because there's nothing else to him. His one goal is just get the blood from the Hulk, or get the formula from the scientists, and it's all very one note. At least with Blonsky, you can argue that he has a cool fight scene as a culmination of that plot, which, again, I digress. Also, Glenn Talbot shares an odd similarity to Larry Talbot. The main character from the Universal's The Wolfman. A movie about a guy who has a monstrous persona he transforms into and causes destruction. An interesting connection, if an obvious one. And no, Glenn Talbot doesn't transform, he gets blown up in that bad sequence. Anyway, Bruce's dad breaks into the lab, pretending to be a janitor, and he starts fucking around in there, setting up Bruce's accident and eventual transformation into the Hulk. But all this is shown in this languid, vague style. We never get a sense of who Bruce is outside his job or on screen, because there's not much going on with Bruce. Compare this to Spider-Man or X-Men. In both, we quickly learn who Peter and Logan are, their interests, their personality, how they function in society. But 25 minutes into the Hulk, we don't have that. 25 minutes into Spider-Man, Peter beats up Flash Thompson, paying off both Peter's new abilities and the social status he's had up until this point, before getting said powers. We know who Parker is, the Osborns, MJ, his aunt and uncle, and yes, the Flash. Flash. 25 minutes in the original X-Men, Logan is already in the X-Mansion. He's met Rogue. He's gotten attacked by Sabretooth, and is about to speak to Professor X for the first time. But 25 minutes into the Hulk, Bruce is where he started. He has not progressed at all since that opening sequence. We don't know what he's really working on beyond it has regenerative capabilities. We don't know why he's working on it, what started that. We don't know his extending relationship with Betty beyond, they maybe dated, and had a relationship, and then they broke up, whatever. We know nothing about General Ross, who's there. Nothing meaningful has happened to disrupt Bruce's life yet. 25 minutes on paper might not seem like a lot, but it's a long time to have a character remain virtually unchanged in a story. 25 minutes is almost the entire first act of Iron Man. Think about that for a second. Bruce hasn't had an inciting incident in his own movie. What value does Talbot add? Not much, honestly. What value does Betty's dream actually provide? Not much. We were getting these scenes and characters and moments, but nothing's adding up yet. Talbot basically wants to use the Banner's research for military applications, as I said before. So why not make this guy Blonsky? Make him some actual threat who's actually tangibly connected to the film's ending. Instead, we get a guy who Hulk beats up once and then blows up another sequence. There's not much to his character. There's not much payoff. And no, I'm not going to go blow by blow through the whole film, establishing this intro doesn't have a lot going on, because it's only 30 minutes in. 1/4 of the way through the film, roughly, maybe a fifth roughly, it's 2 hours, 18 minutes long roughly, where Bruce finally has his accident and is bombarded by gamma radiation that triggers the genetic material already put into his body by his father before the film started. And listen, I applaud Ang Lee for making this accident quiet and almost subdued, but it feels like a blip. There's no visual indication that Bruce should be dead. We get this weird comic filter over him, there's a distant nuclear bomb, the Hulk's eye opens up, but then we're told, you almost died. And he's told, you almost died, because nothing in this shot makes you feel like Bruce almost died. That's the problem. The film tells us, this was extreme, this was bad, but the film is so tepid in its approach and so stylistic with its visuals, it doesn't communicate clearly to the audience, Bruce was almost killed in an accident. It's very vague, and thus doesn't feel like much to you when watching it. And this gets even worse when Bruce is in the hospital and David Banner, named after, of course, Bruce Banner's renamed version in the 70s show, shows up with a couple of dogs with him. And listen, he's with his son for the first time. It's father and son meeting for the first time in years. And David's like, I'm your father, and you're also the child of my mind, which is suggesting that the Hulk is a product of his father's scientific research. And Bruce reacts to this news with, barely a facial twitch. A lot of people love Eric Bana as Bruce Banner here. I don't like Eric Bana here. I think he's very repressed, which is good in theory, but he's too repressed. He doesn't emote. Same with Jennifer Connelly. Everyone in this movie, except for Sam Elliott and Nick Nolte, are so suppressed in their emotions, you can't feel what they're feeling. It gets a little boring to watch because they feel kind of like they're sleepwalking through the performance at some scenes. There's some points where Eric Bana shows up where he's like really embodying the character, but not much. I can't even say Eric Bana is good as the Hulk because Eric Bana didn't play the Hulk. The director Ang Lee played the Hulk in motion capture. No, really. Despite all this with Bruce and his father, the scenes with them doesn't feel like much. There's not much tension there because we feel like they don't have a connection. Video essays linger often on the ideas behind Ang Lee's scenes, where Hulk acts like a child in many ways, desperate, an extension of David Banner's cruelty. We see Bruce's desire to suppress and hide the pain he spent a lifetime suppressing. You see, I kind of alluded to this. We learned this much later in the film. Bruce's dad tried to kill Bruce, but his mother died protecting him. That's heavy and disturbing, but we don't actually learn this happened until much later in the film. And you don't really understand why all this happened. There's teases something happened in the house. We see the Hulk behind this door where Bruce vaguely remembers his mother and father had an argument prior to David Banner coming out to kill his son. And it's like, well, what does it mean? How do we feel it? It's not until much later in the film that we know about this, and so it's a twist, but it's also not really a twist, because everyone else knows about it. The story is informed by it. The flashback scene at the beginning implies something like that happened. We know that both parents are supposedly dead, and so it becomes, well, what are we supposed to feel from this? I just keep thinking, how much more effective would it have been if we knew what Bruce was repressing from the start? We would see him struggle to hide the pain, have those boundaries of repression on him. It wouldn't be a twist, it would be a ticking time bomb. It would be knowing that there's something going behind the surface and knowing it's only a matter of time till Bruce realizes it. And then every interaction between father and son would have this hovering over it, as opposed to this information hovering over the scenes on a second viewing. Even the Rosses exist kind of as an extension of this bigger conflict, because Thunderbolt Ross sees Bruce as an extension of his father. He sees Bruce as embodying the sins of the father being passed on to the son, following his father's footsteps, even if unintentionally. Whereas Betty sees Bruce as his own person, someone who's capable of being saved and helped. But they only exist as extensions of Bruce's journey, and Bruce does not go on a journey. His journey is just knowing what he did in the past and not wanting to get captured. So none of it actually makes sense. Every external threat exists as a means to push his story forward, but his story is all internalized and doesn't really start until the last act of the story when we know what's going on with the father. So by hiding this information, it keeps the external conflict from mattering all that much, because Ross is responding to this memory, David's responding to this memory, the only one who's not responding are Bruce and Betty, and that's because they don't know by design. The conflict of the narrative is weighed based on the influence of this one twist, but I think it's kind of important information. I think the tension's more interesting when you know Bruce had this horrible traumatic experience. The Hulk only matters because he's an extension of that trauma. Telling us the trauma exists is far less effective than starting with that trauma early on. Even if Bruce repressed it, that doesn't mean the audience doesn't need to know about it, especially because people only appreciate this film more knowing that information going in thanks to spoilers. When the film came out, people were like, what's the point of this whole film? Where's the conflict? The conflict is anchored on Bruce's pained childhood. So by not showing that to us, it reduces the intensity of the film by its nature. So just show it to us at the beginning. That's more effective, I think. And this ultimately feeds into the resolution of the film itself. Up until this point, the threat has been purely external. It's David Banner fucking with Bruce, or the military chasing Bruce. But in the finale, we learn everything about David Banner. We adopt Bruce's mom and all that, and he becomes the absorbing man, the culmination of his whole film's worth of experiments on himself and his son. And he tries to absorb the Hulk, essentially, to assimilate its powers and become immortal. We also learn that because of experiments David did to himself in the 60s, many traits that David now has inside of him were passed on to Bruce, which is why his accident with the gamma radiation triggered a Hulk transformation at all. He's unique in this sense. There's not going to be too many She-Hulks in this world, I guess. He essentially passed down his genetic material that he used on himself to Bruce. And then, in a fit of rage, he commits domestic terrorism in the 60s and blows up a whole lab. I'm sure that radiation has no impact whatsoever on Betty or her father, who were in the radiation fallout of a nuclear wasteland. I'm sure that was fine and caused no cancer or anything like that at all. And listen, the scenes where we see the 60s, they all work. The flashback scene at the beginning, that works. In the third act, when we see what actually happened with Bruce, those scenes are good. All the scenes where we see this past, they work, but they feel disconnected from the rest of the film, which is so languid, without any driving factor pushing things forward, outside of the military wants to contain the Hulk. That's the problem, isn't it? None of this is ultimately satisfying to an audience because none of it feels connected. It takes us so long to know what Nick Nolte did in any meaningful capacity. And so what are we left with? Bruce dicking around a lab with Betty? Mutant poodles who get smashed by the Hulk? Well, what's left is the Hulk. We're showing the Hulk, right? Except that takes forever. It takes 40 minutes for the Hulk to transform for the first time. Meaning for 40 minutes of the film, there is no driving action. Bruce is a purely reactive figure in this sense, without any drive for himself, no motivation. We don't even get the sense that he is suppressing anything until halfway through the film, when a confrontation with Ross tells Bruce he's repressing memories. And Nick Nolte isn't very good in this movie. I know people love this character and all that. He's goofy and silly and hard to understand sometimes. He's a wacky, weird guy. He should be making Bruce feel small. He should be terrifying. This is an abusive father who almost murdered his son, and he feels like a kooky little wacky scientist guy. Even his conversations with Bruce are so sociopathic and detached, it's hard to really feel that tension. I want to draw a comparison to a very scary father in fiction, that being Jack Torrance in The Shining. In The Shining, Jack Nicholson doesn't have to do anything. He's just there, and Danny feels small by comparison. There's a great scene in The Shining where Jack Torrance is in a bedroom and Danny goes to talk to him, and it's terrifying, even though it's just a father smiling and hugging his son, because there is this unspoken tension. And that's way before Jack takes an axe and starts whacking people off. Meanwhile, with Nick Nolte, not really. Betty has a scene where she is alone with David Banner, and nothing happens in that scene, though David later sends his mutant dogs after Betty to kidnap her or whatever. But it's very tensionless. We know she's going to be safe. That's the big issue with the Hulk. You can tell me something is inside the Hulk's head all you want to provide these disturbing dream sequences, how the Hulk is standing in the childhood bedroom where his father emerged to go kill him from. But it doesn't mean anything if there's no tension. The bathroom mirror sequence, that one dream sequence when he's falling and goes into the bathroom and sees the Hulk on the other side, it's great. But what's it actually saying? The Hulk and Banner own the same body, that they're different intelligences, that Bruce suppresses him. Okay, but what does that tell us that we didn't already know? Nick Nolte exists to spur on Bruce's anger and pain so he can transform. Okay, so what? What makes that interesting? Bruce can get angry from so many other factors in his life. The problem is Bruce is so boring and so non-reactive that you have to force him to get angry. Even his first transformation sequence, it's kind of bland, isn't it? Like, he gets frustrated and stressed out and then transforms, okay, but it's not clear what's triggering it. There's a few tensions going on, sure, some stress, but it feels uncinematic. Now, compare that to The Incredible Hulk, the MCU film. That fully commits to being a generic smash monster movie. And it is a generic smash monster movie, complete with lots of smashing, lots of goofiness. Not a great movie, it's okay, but it does satisfy the audience expectations going in. You want big smashy smash, you get big smashy smash. Ang Lee's Hulk tries to add this rich interior life to the Hulk, which it doesn't get anchored to anything, it's just floating. And I would argue it fails to sufficiently tie everything internally with the external conflict, which brings us to the external threat. The Glazers, when talking about the Hulk, often ignore Act 1, almost entirely, but they only focus on Act 2 and some of Act 3. And it's Act 3, and that's where the bathroom sequence happens, where Hulk twists a tank around, he runs through the city, he smashes a few things, he's jumping through the desert looking at nature. But the problem is, the Hulk's middle, it's so nothing happens. It's soppy. Again, it takes 40 minutes to get to a single Hulk scene in a Hulk movie. But whatever. Okay. It's taking its time. It's being meditative, maybe. I don't know. Meditating what? Not much, but it's meditating. It's vague anxiety that makes Hulk out, which is disconnected from what's actually driving the plot, which is Nick Nolte fucking around. But that transformation scene, it happens. He trashes his lab, he smashes a police car. There are some cool shots of Hulk in the shadows here, but there's also a lot of scenes where Hulk is just standing there. When Bruce's dad shows up, the Hulk just stands there. When Hulk remembers the trauma David dealt to him, he doesn't smash David, he just jumps out. He pops out through the roof and then just goes somewhere. And despite all that incredible effort being put into bringing the scene to life, what is accomplished? He smashes a lab, he gets arrested for it afterwards by Thunderbolt Ross, but that's it. Then he fights a bunch of mutant dogs who are mutated from Bruce's blood because David acquired Bruce's blood. And it's like, okay, sure. In the book Save the Cat, a guide to screenwriting, Act 2 often has the quote-unquote fun and games section. It's the stuff the audience wants to see. In a superhero film, it's superheroics. In a monster film, it's monster fighting, or monsters. And the Hulk is both. But we get really neither. Hulk punches a mutant dog, or 2 or 3. His dad experiments on him. He runs from the military, he escapes from a military base, he fights a tank, he chews on a missile, and it's all very functional. It's very much, thing happens to Hulk, Hulk reacts, Hulk runs away. And yet, Talbot gets his ass kicked a few times. Okay, whatever. The character really adds up to nothing really in the end. Bruce's dad shows up a lot, but he's just there to be referencing stuff. It feels like a lot of these scenes can be cut. You can really cut out the entire scene with the poodles and dogs. You can cut out most of the military stuff and lose nothing. Everything is a build-up to Bruce remembering his trauma, and then he fights his father, the Absorbing Man. And everything else just feels kind of disconnected from that core element. Do you know what the problem is, ultimately? The Hulk never feels like a monster. We know that Bruce is suppressing some rage, but what's he really do with that? He's jumping through fields, he's looking at nature and flowers, he's smashing a tank. Who doesn't want to do that once in a while? But you know what we never see? Innocent people dying, buildings being smashed that Bruce doesn't actually own. We focus so much on Bruce and his trauma with his dad, and not how the cycle of violence ruins things outside of that. Yeah, the Hulk only attacks people who provoke him, like Talbot. Ross is a misguided villain. David's an asshole. But the problem is, they're kind of right about some stuff. David is creating something amazing with science. Ross should be afraid of the Hulk. But we don't really get any of that on the film. It's just all the fights we get have very little exterior destruction. It's all targeted towards a specific target. If Hulk fights a tank, he destroys the tank. He doesn't destroy nature. How much more effective would it be if when he's fighting the mutant dogs, he smashes a tree into a building, or knocks a house down and causes destruction? Or when he's fighting the military, he just throws missiles left and right and ruins the nature he admires seconds before. I mean, sees the flames in horror. We don't get a sense that the Hulk is dangerous to those around him, just those who piss him off. And that's a problem. Now, I do want to talk about Ross here for a second, because he is one of the more compelling characters in this film. I think more compelling than the MCU, by far, because he's not exactly wrong, is he? He suspects Bruce because of Ross's experience with David Banner, who, again, caused a nuclear detonation in his face, basically. He wants to protect his daughter from someone he sees as a danger to the world. But he doesn't act until Bruce's lab gets torn apart, though he is there already, waiting. By all accounts, Ross isn't a terrible guy. This is distinctly different than the MCU version of Ross, who is explicitly a selfish asshole who wants to get the Hulk and capture him to use him for military experiments. But then again, Ross does threaten to lock Bruce up before he turns into the Hulk, so there's that. Once the Hulk is around, Ross locks him up, but mostly for public safety. Yeah, he's gonna do research on him and all that, but the Hulk is a massive monster capable of causing massive destruction. Yeah, you want to keep that under wraps. And frankly, the film undercuts this concern by rarely showing the Hulk cause problems. Because the Hulk is so focused on only attacking a target in front of him, who is directly antagonizing him, it reduces the threat the Hulk poses. Compare that to the Avengers, where Hulk just smashes things all around him. Or in Avengers Age of Ultron, that scene where the Hulk destroys an entire city out of rage and Tony has to stop it. These are scenes that focus on the Hulk being this uncontrollable force of danger. You get why people are afraid of him, why he deliberately isolates himself. But in this movie, he destroys 2 buildings and he, I guess, has a lease on both of them. So it's like, what's going on here? Ross, on paper, is justified. But the problem is his justification of fearing the Hulk is undercut by the film not showing the Hulk be a threat. And again, it's a greater problem with the film that it's afraid of making you afraid. The Incredible Hulk and the MCU kind of understood a few things about the Hulk. The MCU's Incredible Hulk and the later MCU films kind of understood for a while that we should both love and fear the Hulk. The Hulk should be someone we are never truly comfortable with. Ang Lee's film gets so caught up in the internal mediations of the Hulk that we forget the Hulk is a monster. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby drew from Universal monster films when crafting the original Hulk. And let's look at that for a second. the original James Whale Frankenstein film, the monster is this misunderstood baby, much like the Hulk is in Ang Lee's film. He's unaware of the world around him, just finding beauty where it is in front of him, flowers and light, but he's also a genuine threat, capable of destruction, and he's innocent. He drowns a young girl out of ignorance because they're playing a game. They're tossing flowers into the lake. He picks up the girl, tosses her into the lake, and she drowns. But he also goes out to hurt Dr. Frankenstein out of anger, but then also protects Dr. Frankenstein, holding on to something that's meaningful to him, someone he cares about but also fears. And as he learns how to read in the sequel Bride of Frankenstein, we see the monster develop even more so. Then there's the Wolfman, Larry Talbot. He's a monster who is both a bloodthirsty fiend and a man. He's innocent. He's tormented by what he does, but can't control it, and he fights desperately to suppress his darkness. Ultimately, in the film, he's killed by his own father, but it's not enough. The curse brings Larry back. He can't stay dead, and so keeps trying to find new ways to put himself down for good, but keeps ending up in the crosshairs of other greater monsters. And this culminates in the comedy film Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, where the Wolfman hunts down Dracula, and at the end of the film, kills Dracula, dying as a monster, but dying with some direction aimed to a target of evil. But we only get that after multiple films of him murdering people at random. Meanwhile, Ang Lee's Hulk is always an innocent. He's always just a traumatized figure of pain, and he doesn't really get to be a monster. You don't get afraid of him. And as a result, every scene involving him feels aimless and pointless, because he's not destroying something, he's targeting someone who he doesn't like. People act like the problem with the Hulk is that the film was too heady or too mature, but the problem is it's too hollow. There's a lot of time wasted on nothing, and the film never delivers the goods, making a monster into a monster. There is that great scene in the bathroom and all that. People act like that's what Marvel should be doing right now. And yeah, it should. Familiarity breeds contempt, and we're familiar with MCU Hulk being a clown. The Hulk should be terrifying, should be threatening. I think Brand New Day is going to do some of that, but this older film does make the Hulk effectively frightening, in theory, but not in practice. I think the film needed to do three things different. For one, I think when Bruce's dad shows up, the Hulk shouldn't have ran away. He should have just killed him. Just break the guy into pieces, smash him to pieces. Hey, keep it a secret why Bruce is all traumatized, but it works better if Bruce's dad dies, because that way we don't know why the Hulk did that so quickly. And he's a threat. It feels irrational. You just meet Bruce's dad for the first time after years of being disappeared, and now you murdered him? Why? What's going on with that? And that kind of element is so interesting. Now, Nick Nolte would still be around, I think. He'd be in the background of Bruce's memory, a constant fear, a phantom of rage and pain, fueling the Hulk's anger from within. Perhaps as some genetic means through which he transferred his psyche into the Hulk in some way. Something like that. David Banner is not as interesting as a physical threat, and the film makes him so much of a physical threat that you kind of ask the question, why? If you really want to have David Banner represent the trauma Bruce undergoes that makes him into the Hulk, make him purely psychological. And then we have a murder that Ross can hunt him for, seeing proof that he is a danger to those around him. Now, second change, make Hulk destroy shit. He shouldn't just fight the military in a big desert. He needs to smash some buildings down. He needs to be out of control. He needs to be dangerous. He needs to see a couple arguing and see his father and the man and kill them both. He needs to cause horror and pain that's out of control, to cause genuine fear, because Bruce can no longer avoid the fact his repression is causing damage. He's repressed this rage for so long, it needs to boil up into something uncontrollable, something unstoppable. Also, as Thunderbolt Ross pursues the Hulk, maybe Ross sees the cost of his pursuit. Ross saw Bruce's father detonate a nuclear lab in front of him out of anger. I feel he'll be vindicated, but also horrified, seeing the equivalent of an atomic bomb dropped in the city in the wake of the Hulk. The Hulk should be a force of terror. And so when Betty goes to confront the Hulk and try to help Bruce, there should be that sense of danger because the Hulk keeps smashing everything. There should be the fear that maybe the Hulk will just throw Betty around like a rag doll at first. And the third change, that third act. We just changed a lot of it already because now David Banner's dead, but maybe Ross has a weapon that stops the Hulk, can suppress the Hulk transformation, but when he uses it, it doesn't stop the Hulk, it stops the Hulk from going back to Banner. Now Hulk's in complete control. And now Banner is inside the mind of the Hulk. And he has to fight his way out to regain control. And he's confronted with the past with his father, having to deal with those psychic pains and knowing that the reason the Hulk is like this is because of the emotional scars of his childhood. And all the while, we see that Ross has to witness the destruction the Hulk causes, and he's at fault, that he's responsible, that tempering with this uncontrollable force result in that force being worse. We need to see the external conflict reflect the state of the internal one, as opposed to feeling completely disconnected. In the present film, it's all external conflict until Act 3, even though those first 2 acts are informed by the internal conflict in Act 3. They need to be smoothed out throughout. We need to keep that tension going. Also, cut a half hour out of the film. Trim these fucking scenes. They're too fucking long when nothing happens. I feel Ang Lee was not the guy for this movie. His films are slower paced, more meditative. You know who should have made this film? David Cronenberg. Cronenberg basically made the Hulk in the 80s. It's called The Fly, a terrifying descent into madness where a scientific experiment turns an innocent, charming scientist into a monster, into something cruel and evil and vile and destructive. You feel pity for Jeff Goldblum's character, but you also fear what he has become. The Hulk should be a monster movie, and every attempt to make him into a superhero has failed for one crucial reason. The Hulk isn't a monster who's a hero. He's a hero who's also a monster. He's not a soft professor. He's not an action guy. He is a monster who can rip your head off. Consider how scared Bruce is in that first Avengers film of transforming. In this film, Eric Bana is in complete control because he doesn't transform unless a set piece has to happen. And as such, any film that fails to make the Hulk scary does not get what the Hulk is about. Well, we'll get to that. I said about Spider-Man. Well, okay, I wrote it in the script already. Okay. Back. Ross. A lot of people love Eric Bana as Bruce Bane. So Eric Bana is just Bruce Wayne. I keep saying Bruce Wayne. Shit. You know, I kind of look at... fuck.